Hello, everyone. This is your host, Andrew Pledger, and I am a survivor of Bob Jones University. And this is Beyond BJU Exposing Fundamentalism, which is a podcast that sheds light on Christian fundamentalism in the context of Bob Jones University. The show includes survivor stories from BJU and also Bob Jones affiliated ministries like Christian day schools, camps, and churches. The podcast also explores BJU's influence beyond the school and its impact on American society. I want to thank my Patreon supporters who allow me to do this work, and if you could join my Patreon, it would be greatly appreciated. The link is in the description of every episode. But if you feel that you can't do that, then I would appreciate it if you would leave a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because this helps other listeners like you discover the show. Thank you. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Andrew Pledger, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to have Chris Peterman on the show today. How are you doing today, Chris?
Hey, Andrew, I am doing great today. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And I'm also very excited to talk with you about everything.
I'm so excited too. For people who are not familiar with you, could you introduce yourself and also share a bit about your upbringing and how that led you to BJU?
My name is Chris Peterman. I grew up in Bradenton, Florida many years ago. I grew up in an independent fundamental Baptist church called Community Baptist Church, who also had a Christian school attached to it. So I went to that Christian school from K-4 through 12th grade. That church was part of the feeder system for Bob Jones University. Growing up there, we were our worldview was very tightly controlled. It was an experience, especially now being so far removed, but definitely shaped a lot of my initial foundational worldviews. And that led me down the path of eventually ending up at Bob Jones.
So I'm assuming then Bob Jones, that was the main college that they promoted and they pushed through Christian schools. Okay.
Yes.
Got
Now, we
you.
did, people in our orbit would go to Pensacola Christian College or Clearwater Christian. When I was growing up, if you wanted to be the best of the best and make your church proud, you went to Bob Jones. That was really where they wanted you to go. All of the leadership of the church and the school went there. So I wanted to be a good little boy, and I followed the path.
And I'm curious, when you were in that system your entire life, what really changed, or did anything change at that time from when you were younger? Like going to Bob Jones, were you 100% believing, yeah, I believe this and I'm going? Or what was that like going out of that environment into Bob Jones?
Yeah, I mean, the church and school that I grew up in had a lot of the same standards and rules, especially around dressing and music. So it wasn't a huge culture shock going to Bob Jones. We really didn't change much from when I started in K-4 through 12th grade. It was you're going to listen to the old hymns and come to church twice on Sundays and once on Wednesdays, and don't go to the Devil's House, the movie theater, because you might harm the cause of Christ by someone seeing you. And it was very similar to Bob Jones. It was just a natural kind of progression there. And a lot of us, looking back, may not have been true belief. We just went along with what we were taught. That's all we knew.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that was something eye-opening to me when I got to Bob Jones, just being under my parents my whole life, and then going to Bob Jones and not being under them physically there. I realized, oh, wow, I really conform to a lot of these things because that's how I got love and acceptance from them. And now they're not here. And now I'm noticing that I'm not caring about these things that much. And I went to Bob Jones really fearful, very aware of my own sexuality. But I'm curious, with you being a part of the queer community, when did you kind of realize your own sexuality?
That's so interesting because I knew I was different from an extremely young age, probably 5 or 6. I've never been a straight man. Straight men often get those same feelings around that same time, but they feel like it's normal. But I was not attracted to women. I was attracted to men. I would lay in my bed every night. I remember for years just praying, why am I dealing with this? Why am I struggling with this? I was part of the church and I was a good boy. So I would go out and hand out tracts to the lost on the street corners. We'd talk about how gay people were going to burn in hell. But then at night, those desires would come back. And every time I prayed, nothing seemed to change. That was something that I struggled with very early on, all the way through college. Like, why would God put this in my life? My pastor told me to pray. And we did not talk about it. I was definitely not out. But you're taught to pray and God will take that burden away, but it never went away.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It hurt my heart because I relate so much to that too. There is that feeling of being so different, feeling out of place. I'm curious though, when you had those feelings, I don't know if you heard gay growing up. For me, I heard sodomite a lot. I didn't really hear gay. So did you hear the word gay, or what label did you prescribe to yourself and then influence how you saw yourself?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting question. Definitely heard a lot of homosexual, and homosexual was like a bad term. I'm not sure that I heard gay very often. Definitely heard the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and sodomites, probably a lot more often than you would think appropriate for a church that claimed to be 99% straight.
I know.
I
Yes,
don't know
I
why
know.
y'all
Isn't
talked
that
about,
so weird?
yeah, like stay out of our bedroom. But yeah, I would not have put a label on myself at that time because I don't know that I knew what it was. But as I moved into my teen years, I found out my sister was gay and some other people in my family were gay. So I started to learn more. I finally got a computer because I'm a very elder millennial at this point, and access to information on the internet was much more readily available. I didn't have to go to the school library at my Christian school and try to look up what gay was. I was able to expand my worldview there. Eventually, I put the label gay on myself, but I did not come out until after Bob Jones.
Okay. And so here you are feeling different, and your entire life is all about conformity, conforming to this standard. This is a sign that you are saved, you're the righteous, you are the good. And straying from this is a path of destruction, you're unsaved. So here you are, different in an environment that requires conformity, then going into a similar environment that has the same requirements. What was that experience like for you heading into Bob Jones University, aware that your sexuality is different from what you've been taught and having these desires for men? How did that affect your time at Bob Jones University?
And see, it's interesting because growing up in that same environment, it was something that I always had to have that wall up, and I could never truly be myself. When you do it for so many years, it literally from 5 years old, because I was in that, and I would classify all of it as a cult, a very highly controlling, authoritarian group that makes you conform to their prescribed notion of what good is, what God is. So it was just who I was. Like, I would present myself as the good, godly Christian boy that conformed and listened to everything during the day. And then at night, I would struggle. And it was certainly a dichotomy in my mind, but it wasn't something that I was actively thinking about constantly. It was just the life I lived. Going to Bob Jones, I found the dorms to be challenging in some aspects because there are certainly some spaces in the dorms that are more homosexually inclined, like the showers, the open showers, and people changing in the dorms. I had to protect myself there, not get caught glancing or be too flamboyant. I had to build a better wall because I was
Yeah.
around people constantly instead of being able to like kind of step away into my own reality in my room at my house, away from my parents, away from my teachers and pastors. At Bob Jones, you're really surrounded 24/7. It's not something that I necessarily thought about when I was first enrolling and applying, but thinking back, it was a burden to have that wall up all the time.
Mm.
Does that kind of
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah, I just relate so much to all that you're saying because going to Bob Jones University, being gay was just terrifying, so hard to keep that wall up because you can't have that genuine connection. And it's just
Right.
such an isolating, like you're surrounded by so many people, but you feel so isolated and alone. I know to me with the shower situation, I would always be like, all right, when is no one going to be in the showers? And that is when I'm in the shower. And I also try not to be flamboyant, and that didn't work very well. Either. I remember
Yeah.
a friend of mine, they're like, oh my gosh, Andrew, I always know it's you. I can just see your walk in the distance, and I know that's it. And
For me, I would run around screaming, like literally high pitched screaming. And so everyone would know when I was coming. But it was interesting. I don't know if you experienced this, but even in cult like situations where you know if it comes out that you're gay or anything like that, you're going to, face severe consequences. The gays are still there. The gays are going to find each other. We always found each other.
yeah, for me, there were definitely people that I suspected were queer, but I was too terrified to connect with them. In the end, though, I did connect with a bisexual guy. We ended up being roommates, and he told me he had a crush on me. He was also my discipleship group leader. He had the nerve to say, we can never have sex because I'm your discipleship group leader, and that is a bad example.
Oh my God. Like just that conversation alone, if someone had overheard that, y'all could have been in so much trouble. I don't know if people in the real world understand the level of oversight and scrutiny that everyone faces there.
Yeah, we did not get along. That was an interesting situation. A lot of sexual tension and different things, but yeah.
A lot of sexual tension.
And then there's another queer person where I think we talked a couple times. I was the kind of person where like I didn't trust people. That system trains you to be that way. Like you really can at Bob Jones. So I was very untrustworthy just to keep myself safe. Like it was a trial and response for me.
It really is.
But I'm curious for you, what were some queer people that you met?
There was a group of guys that were not out, but we connected and vibed, and we all kind of knew. Like Josh Medlin, Eric Inafuku, what's that man's name? Timothy Colbert. He's a big drag queen now. Good for him. Obviously, my roommate. And then I had a couple straight. They're still straight to this day, but they did things I didn't think straight boys would do. There was a group there, and it always happened that they put us all in the same hall. I don't know if this kind of thing was happening on other halls and other dorms, but it somehow always seemed to happen on the hall I was on. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. When I was at Bob Jones, there was always a joke about third floor Smith.
Yes, third floor Smith, and then for me, it was second floor Johnson.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh my God.
Back in the day.
Before we get into which is a big part of your story, is the protest, the first like student-led protest of Bob Jones you started, which is incredible. Before we get into that, I'm curious if there are any impactful experiences that you wanted to share about your time at Bob Jones University, specifically a negative impact on you. If there are any stories from breaking rules or experiences with leaders or how you were treated by students, just anything you're comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that for my first 3 years, I was kind of just an average student. I didn't really get into that much trouble. Like, I would get demerits for not shaving or not making my bed, but it was just a normal experience. I would go to class. I didn't have any problems with people. Then I sat out for a couple of years and worked in public with like the normal people. I worked at JCPenney and I worked at Walmart. I turned some money to come back to school. And I kind of began expanding my worldview and realizing that what I was taught, the world is evil, we need to be set apart and separate, wasn't necessarily true. I could have friends in the real world and that would be completely fine and they weren't going to drag me to hell. So when I came back for my like final show, I had a different view towards Bob Jones. And I'd also began learning about the sexual abuse that had happened in my church and school growing up, and some sexual abuse stories coming out of Bob Jones just starting to trickle out. So I came back to Bob Jones with this idea that maybe this isn't the perfect place, the world's most unusual university. Maybe it's just a flawed place trying to control a group of kids. We were adults, but they kind of kept us as children so they can control us. So I was just thinking about all these different rules and why they really didn't matter. And I had more of a voice. So that's really when I began butting up with leadership at the university, like John Dalton and my dorm counselor. I remember specifically, and I'm sure we'll get to it through the Do Right BJU process and speaking out on sexual abuse, I was told that when Jesus came back for the apocalypse, for the rapture, that he would have an angel come and kill me with a sword. My dorm counselor told me that. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Still waiting on that one. Hasn't happened yet. But yeah, that was an interesting experience. I had a lot of counseling directly with Dalton that I would say was not helpful in any shape or form. But overall, I would say it was probably a pretty standard BJU experience for the vast majority of my time there.
Okay, interesting. What I am loving hearing about your story is you were the person, you try to follow the rules, be the goody two shoes, and then you ended up leading this protest and speaking out. You started the Do Right BJU movement. Could you really explain what incident or started that and really motivate you to do that movement, that protest?
When I was out of college and working, I learned about a situation at the church I attended where one of my good friends was sexually assaulted and raped by her brother. And that was brought to the church leadership, and they covered it up, and nothing was done. And then very quickly after that, I learned about a situation in my personal family where my father had raped all of his daughters. My mother took that to the pastor, and he told her that she should stay with him because it would harm the cause of Christ if she did anything. I found out that one of the deacons also raped one of my sisters, and it was the same response. So I'd been learning about all of these terrible incidences that were being swept under the rug, and these victims were being blamed. All that time, I was also being exposed through some other friends that had gone to Bob Jones, these different groups that were talking about issues within the independent fundamental Baptist cult, and specifically Bob Jones. We were talking about things that we thought were issues. And the reoccurring theme was sexual abuse and sexual assault. And it just kept coming up. So I went back to Bob Jones and I learned about Tina Anderson. And Tina Anderson was a 15-year-old girl in Concord, New Hampshire, that was raped by a person in the church. And her pastor, Chuck Phelps, forced her to go in front of the entire congregation and apologize for being raped. And then he shipped her off to have the baby, literally destroyed her whole world, took away all her friends, isolated her. Can you imagine a 15-year-old girl having to go through that, having to stand up and apologize, and then her entire world crumbling? Really, that was a catalyst behind me wanting to go to the Bob Jones University leadership and start talking about things that I thought they could do better. Before I started Do Right BJU, I was going to John Dalton and I was saying, hey, I learned about this situation with Tina Anderson and found out that Chuck Phelps, who was her pastor, is on the board of trustees at this university, and my tuition dollars are going to him to lead this university, and I'm not okay with that, and I would like to talk about this. And he shut it down immediately, did not want to talk about it, and basically told me to shut up and or there would be consequences. When I left his office after that conversation, I immediately went back to my dorm, got on Facebook, and started Do Right BJU. It was pretty obvious who started it, because he didn't want to have that conversation. So I said, okay, we're going to have the conversation in a public forum. And it kind of really took off from there.
Good for you. I'm so proud of you for doing that.
Wow, thank you.
And just the courage that it takes to speak up, because we both know what they do to people who speak up about any of the harm in that environment. For people who are interested in the Tina Anderson case, there was an ABC 2020 episode about the independent fundamental Baptist cults, and her story was a big part of that. It's actually on YouTube, and I'll link the parts of that because people can. I think it's around 50 minutes total once people listen or watch all the parts. It's really eye opening about her story and of the IFB. So you start the Facebook page. Who did you even start following to get attention, spreading the word
Um,
about it?
And I believe even to this day, there's a large group of alumni who are very active and vocal on social media, pushing the university towards a more progressive stance and exposing a lot of the issues that are clearly there. I was already embedded in a lot of those groups. I was talking to them and coordinating with a lot of the leadership of those different groups, and they were aware and they really pushed. We quickly gained a couple thousand followers within a couple weeks. It was pretty organic, utilizing the network that was already in place.
That is amazing. When did you realize we're going to have to do a protest?
Fairly quickly on, I brought in a couple other admins to help run it because it was so big. We were talking about what we want BJU to stand for, what do we want our goals to be, and how would we make the most impact. And we talked about different options, and we landed on like a small silent protest in front of Bob Jones. We thought that would be an easy way to get some students that maybe wanted to participate, as well as the alumni to show their support for the movement. So we decided on holding a balloon release. It got some media attention and also some condemnation from university leadership. But yeah, we held it on December 12th, 2011.
How did students treat you? What was the student body reaction to this protest?
It was interesting because obviously we live in an age where we understand misinformation and blatant lies on social media. But back then, social media was relatively new to the university, and its cheerleaders were spinning the message. So there was a substantial population of the student body that either did not engage with Do Right BJU or the protest. And we actually had a counter protest that occurred. Like, they weren't very organized, but they wore blue to be different than everybody wearing red, which is fine. Freedom of speech, like what Bob Jones teaches. Then we did have a fairly substantial population that, while they certainly were nervous, I got a lot of messages from students saying, "Hey, I support your protest, but I cannot get in trouble." There was definitely a large portion of the population that was supportive. During chapel, because if you don't know, at least when I was there, we had chapel almost every day. That day, people wore some type of red on them. They didn't have to wear like a full red shirt, but a lot of people wore a little piece of red ribbon or something just to show support. And then right after chapel, we went to, the little center circle where they got the founders dead in the ground. We went there and released the balloons. There were probably a dozen current students and then several dozen former students that were there.
Amazing. And then after that protest, what was leadership's reaction or retaliation against you and others who were in the protest?
So interestingly, the protest was held on December 12th. One of our main reasons for the protest was to get Chuck Phelps to resign from the Board of Trustees. He actually, about a week before, resigned. And I think leadership thought that would kill the whole thing. It did not. So Chuck Phelps was gone, but we were still asking for accountability from the university and an independent review of their counseling methods and awareness that how they were treating victims and survivors was not okay. So we held the protest and the media was there. They spoke directly with university leadership, and the university said on record that there would be no retaliation against the students. But pretty quickly, because it was December, we went on Christmas break. Almost immediately for me getting back from Christmas break, I had to start having direct counseling with John Dalton. They would claim that wasn't retaliation for the protest, just trying to build my walk with Christ, but it was certainly retaliation because from January until I got kicked out, I had to meet with him every other day for an hour, which was a significant burden on my time and mental well-being. Even before the protest was held, while Do Right BJU was building steam, they were sending students in leadership positions to follow me. I would be constantly followed on campus and off campus. Anything I did that was deemed remotely against the rule book, I would get in trouble for. There certainly was retaliation coming from all angles.
Cults be culting. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Cult be culting. Yes, they
Yes.
do.
So what was the thing that they claimed that they kicked you out for?
So near the end of the semester, I had gone off campus. You know that Starbucks that's right there? I gone down to Starbucks to get a coffee and to watch an episode of Glee, Emily and Peter. At that time, there was nothing in the rule book that said you could not watch TV off campus. I'm sitting there watching my episode of Glee. And of course, the second I come back on campus, I get a call. John Dalton called me in and said, I'm going to give you 50 demerits for watching an inappropriate TV show, and that it's going to put you over your limit. Unfortunately, you're going to be expelled. The reason behind that was Glee was so worldly. It had dancing, worldly music, and it had gay people on it. We can't be supporting that. Those are the reasons he didn't like Glee. They claimed that that was the reason. I had also posted lyrics to a Christian song, and they were giving me 25 demerits for that. Either one was going to put me over the edge because they had been giving me demerits for not having my beard closely shaved at midnight. So he had told me that, and I had made a comment because I had a lot of media connections at that point. I had made a comment that, sure, you can kick me out for watching Glee, but you will be on the news tomorrow morning. And he also gave me demerits for intimidating him and threatening the university, which, okay, whatever. You're threatening to kick me out so I can lose thousands and thousands of dollars for something that, who cares? I watch Glee. Yes, I did. I did tell him I was going to contact the media, and I did contact the media. So that was why I got kicked out.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Before we recorded, I was saying to you how I had heard different things about you from different people, and had always heard, oh yeah, that kid, they claimed he got kicked out for watching Glee. And then I finally heard it was just an excuse because of the protests that you led. And I'm so glad that you did, because I'm trying to think, the Grace report, that soon after your protest, that started. So do you think that played a role in the Grace report happening?
That part of the Do Right BJU movement. So we had requested that they either bring in the Julie Valentine Center or Grace to do an audit of the counseling methods and to do interviews with anybody that wanted to speak about their past with Bob Jones or the current situation they were in, specifically regarding sexual abuse. So surprisingly, they did announce almost a month after I got kicked out that they were bringing Grace in. I do believe that, obviously I have no proof, but I don't even think Bob Jones knew what Grace was until Do Right BJU. So I do think that we played a part in bringing Grace in.
Okay, yeah, this is now connecting some dots for me. That's incredible. I've always wondered too, that might help a little bit, but just Bob Jones opening themselves up to scrutiny is something
That they had done.
Yeah,
Ever.
they tried so hard they fired Grace.
They did.
Fire
And then
Grace.
we pushed back very loudly, but I don't think they were expecting that we, as a group of alumni or former students, had that much power still after everything had kind of died down. They waited about a year and a half, I believe. Grace had gotten pretty deep into the weeds and had been doing extensive interviews when they suddenly announced they were firing them. So we made a loud pushback, and they backed down and brought them back.
That's amazing. And I think what was incredible too when I was doing research for the Surviving Bob Jones podcast was it ended up being in the New York Times about the Grace report or Grace, and then them being fired and everything. And man, the media got involved with that.
They did.
It's amazing.
Yep. I don't know if I read the Grace report, but it actually showed rampant issues with their counseling and serious challenges with abuse throughout the IB, but specifically Bob Jones and them covering it up. They were able to interview a large number of survivors. And I got quite a few messages from people about how just being able to get their voice out and speak their truth, how helpful and healing that was. So to be a small part of that was very rewarding.
Oh yeah, this was definitely. And I'm curious, what advice would you have for students or just anyone who are currently facing these issues in any high control religious environment or even at Bob Jones who want to speak out, who want to really change things? What advice do you have for people who feel stuck in those situations and want to speak out and do the right thing?
I know it's very cliche, but it does get better. Hang in there, first and foremost, and make choices that you would be proud of when you're 20 years removed, which I almost am. I can say, looking back, I would not have made any other choices. I'm proud that I spoke out and that I was part of getting help for people and giving people a voice when they were voiceless. If you see something that you think is wrong and your moral compass tells you to speak up, but do it in a safe manner where you can come out and still survive. I know if I came out when I was growing up and said I was gay, it's very likely I would have been completely excommunicated. And I don't know how my family would have reacted back then. I could have been homeless. Bob Jones, I got kicked out and they threw my stuff out on the curb on that day. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any money. So I may not have made all the most safe choices. I'm much more, let's make sure we're prepared and think thoroughly through the consequences of your actions, but know that what you do today matters to somebody. And if you see something, say something, and eventually it will get better. You can get out.
Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like when you're in the moment, you just feel like you have to do this. It doesn't matter the consequences. For a lot of us activists, that's what happens. We end up surviving and getting out, and life, it really does get better. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else you would like to share before we end the interview?
I just want to thank you for
Oh,
continuing to bring a voice to those being harmed in these kind of circles, especially Independent Fundamental Baptists and Bob Jones University. I truly do believe it's a cult. They are controlling so many people all across the country. I don't know that people in the real world understand the network and the level of control these different institutions have, especially in 2024, as we are in the depths of this political year. We can see the effects that Independent Fundamental Baptist is having on our political process and our political system. We are being pulled back into the 70s, the 60s, the 50s. These people are really at the root of where this kind of conservative mentality is coming from. And they want us as a country to be what Bob Jones is today. They want to control us. They are controlling women's bodies. They do not want gay people. They do not want Black people. They do not want Latinos. They don't want anyone other than good Christian white men to run this country. When I say good, they ain't good. We know they're not good, but that's in their head. And so it's important that your voice, Andrew, is getting out there and shining a light on this, because it is affecting us today and it will affect us in the future, especially if you look at the Supreme Court and what they are doing. All of this is tied together from the moral majority and the religious right. It is driven directly by Bob Jones and PCC and Liberty University. And we have got to stop it, or we won't have a country where we can live anymore.
you just did a summary of our horrible situation we're in right now. Crazy how interconnected it is, all the different connections, and how these leaders will say to your face that we're separate. But when it comes to connecting to someone that will benefit them politically or like with money, behind the scenes, not always that way. There's exceptions to these rules, always for these leaders who are just white men in power.
Yep. They want to keep that power. Yep.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
I really appreciate it. It's nice to be able to talk to a fellow gay about the situation that we went through. And for anyone that's listening that may be thinking about going to Bob Jones, just don't.
I enjoyed our talk, and I wanted you on the original podcast. I'm so glad I could finally have you on.
Yes, well, I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond BJU. My Patreon supporters allow me to do this work, and I'm so grateful for them. If you could join my Patreon community, it would be greatly appreciated. But if you feel you cannot do that, if you could give the podcast a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because this helps other listeners just like you discover the show. Thank you.